I'm excited today to welcome you to our FabFems Friday webinar. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Trisha Berry, Director of the Women in Engineering Program. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm a chemie, and I'm excited about today's FabFems Friday, where it just so happens that all of our fabulous volunteers are chemies today. That was not necessarily by design, but I like happy accidents like that. So I'm glad to have all of you here. I am not going to introduce them because they will introduce themselves way better and tell you lots more fun things than I would be able to. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. And then students, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. I always have lots of questions that I can throw at them, but I want to give you all the chance first after they introduce themselves to let you all drive where the conversation goes. So be thinking of your questions as they are introducing themselves, and we'll come to you all and see what you want to find out. And if a question pops in your head as someone's introducing themselves, throw it in the chat and we can come back to it after everybody introduces themselves, and you can come off mute as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anne to kick us off and tell us a little bit about who she is.
Hey, everybody. So hopefully you can see my screen all right. Is that there?
Oh, not yet.
Not yet, no. Oh, I have to. Here we go. How about that?
There you go.
So I use Teams a lot. I was telling Trisha before we got started, so apologies on that. So I'm Anne Fornoff. I am a polymer scientist. They call me a senior research specialist at 3M. And I thought I would just sort of walk you through my career progression so that if you've got questions, you have a sense of where I'm coming from. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. I spent the first 18 years of my life in the same house, and then I started to move. So from there, I went to Columbia and studied chemical engineering, as all of the panelists did today. And that was a great experience, going to New York from Toledo. I learned a lot. Did my PhD at Virginia Tech and had a lot of fun, and then started to sow my science wild oats. So from there, I did a postdoc at IBM Almaden, and postdocing is something you can do after you have a PhD. It's really fun. It's just research, you don't teach, and you get to just expand. So I did that at IBM. We did some really fun work with what's called DNA origami. So you fold up DNA into different shapes. And the idea was that you could use that as a molecular breadboard. So that was exciting to me. And then I went to Munich, Germany, and worked on what's called single molecule force spectroscopy, which is a fancy word for saying we tortured single molecules. Some really beautiful physics there. And then I went to 3M, and I started my career at 3M in St. Paul in Minnesota at the headquarters. And I was in the materials lab there. I'm into the polymers, as you may be picking up. And we launched a few products from some of the work that I did there. And then I moved to Austin, 3M Austin Center in early 2016. So I've been here, a little bit over 5 years. And that's been a lot of fun. I'm very, very proud of these products. These are solvent-free, the first final electrical tapes made by a solvent-free process. So that's super exciting to me. And since I've been here, I started a family. So this is my husband and our son, JR. And this photo is a little bit old. He's 2 years old now. And I enjoy running. I am now really into anything that will entertain a 2-year-old. So that's sort of on the personal side. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And one thing that I like to say is, I've had a nice successful career so far. I have more than 25 patents, more than 55 research publications. And I really think I've learned some things along the way. And so I'm so glad that Trisha has us here today, so that if you've got questions, if I've learned anything, I can pass that along. Thanks a lot, Trisha.
Awesome. All right. So I think you can unshare your screen and we will go to Jessica. And now we all have introduction goals because I love the popping up stuff. And now we're all like, now how can I do that? I can't do that so fast today, but that was fun. And thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, so I have no visuals for you, so I'll just kind of talk through it. I grew up in Alabama, but I was raised by Texans and Longhorns, to be precise. So on Alabama-Auburn game day, I was the kid wearing burnt orange. So that's kind of how deep it goes. And then came back to Texas when I graduated high school, and I went to the University of Texas, graduated with my chemical engineering degree in 2001. And then I went to work for ExxonMobil, which is who I'm still working for now. I just celebrated my 20th work anniversary. So yeah, exciting. So in my 20 years with ExxonMobil, I've split my time mostly between manufacturing and supply chain. So I'll say I've had one job where I actually used my chemical engineering degree in like the traditional sense of the word. And that lasted for all of 18 months out of the 20 years. So, but it definitely comes in handy in the manufacturing environment to understand the process and the challenges they may face. And just the analytical skills in general are very useful. And so kind of decided a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, that supply chain was really where my heart was. And so came back to that organization. And I've been doing some pretty fun jobs ever since. So I got to I was on a project where we actually co-developed a product with SAP. So kind of helped tested their technology with them. Then I was our sustainability supervisor for supply chain. So leading kind of discretionary projects to improve the sustainability of our supply chain. And that was until about 2 months ago. And now I'm a digital transformation advisor within supply chain. So implementing new technologies to kind of make our transportation or our supply chain kind of more accessible to our customers, easier for us to manage kind of all those real-time things that are cool now with AI and machine learning. Oh, and I'm married. Yes, I forgot that part. Married, and I have that are 8 and 11. And so, as I mentioned to Trisha earlier, this weekend I will be spending my time at a Cub Scout campout. And then my husband will be with the other one for 4 games of baseball. So that's pretty much how our time goes. I'm also ready for the Astros game. You can't see my shirt, but just an overall big baseball fan. So fun time of year for me.
Awesome. We've got that ready to go for tonight too. Yay. Thanks, Jessica. That's fabulous. Well, let's keep going with our ExxonMobil friends. Let's put it over to Ramya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramya Gautam. So I also work at ExxonMobil with Jessica. So just some background about me. I was actually born in Baton Rouge, but I moved to Houston from the Clear Lake area where NASA is when I was really young. So I claim Houston as my home. I went to the University of Texas as well for my undergraduate degree. I studied chemical engineering. And Trisha mentioned U2 earlier. Actually, me and my friend Aditi were actually the co-founders of U2 at the end of my freshman year. So near and dear to my heart is U2 for sure. So now I did 2 internships throughout my time at UT at ExxonMobil. And so my first one was actually in our downstream area. So I was in more of a commercial role in the supply and transportation group. And then my second internship was actually at a manufacturing site in the chemicals business. And since then I have stayed in chemicals. I started full-time in August of 2019 in chemicals under basic chemicals. So I was in the technology organization where I supported all of our global manufacturing sites and did a lot of like very technical work and helped with technical support, process safety, did some design. I actually had a lab unit for catalyst testing that I owned and was the engineer for. So got to work with operations there. So that was really cool. And then in February, did that for about a year and a half. And then in February of this year, I actually switched to our main campus. So I'm sitting in a conference room at work today, but I am now on a much more business side of things. So I work as still in basic chemicals and in the chemicals organization. And now I do a lot of market analysis and comparing how all of our different olefin sites do versus industry and how advantaged we are versus competitors. And then within that, we're also identifying new profitability areas, working on new major growth ventures, sustainability efforts, and things like that, but more from a business perspective. So very different. But yeah, so that's pretty much all about me.
And what do you like to do in your spare time, Ramya?
Oh, what do I like to do in my, that's a great question. So I love Texas football. I try to go to games when I can. So I was in Dallas last weekend for our very sad loss against OU. I also, during COVID, I took up sand volleyball. So I've been in a sand volleyball league for the past year. So I love to do things outdoors, and especially now because of COVID, it really made that more normal and popular to do. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a very sad loss last weekend.
It was heartbreaking.
lots of head shaking there. Nicole, tell us about you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Menke. I also am a chemical engineer from the University of Texas, so super excited to be here today. I was born and raised in Austin, actually. Both my parents are UT grads, so it was a natural transition. When I was in school as a chemical engineer, I did internships with Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I spent time in my internships doing process development for body wash, then what's called product research, which is about interviewing consumers and users of products to understand what they want from them, and then using my technical knowledge to translate that information to our formulation team members to say, hey, they want a body wash or a shampoo a certain way, maybe it's too watery. Well, they're probably not talking about the actual water content, right? They're talking about maybe viscosity, rheology, the lack of foaming, right? So digging into those attributes to then be able to give a more clear design direction. And then I also spent time as a formulator in Baltimore on the CoverGirl brand as well with my time at P&G. I then went there full time and after graduating in 2012, and spent a little over 6 years in Procter & Gamble. I worked upstream in a multifunctionary discipline within the beauty space. So looking at brands that supported across categories as a formulator and as a process person. Most of that was spent in cosmetics. And then I went to do what I mentioned before, that product research side of things for the Herbal Essences brand. So shampoos, conditioners, stylers. And then I moved to Mary Kay in 2019. And so I've been with Mary Kay for a little over 2.5 years. I started as a researcher doing the same product research that I mentioned previously. But since then, now I'm in a leadership role managing the product research team. So we also have additional capabilities in sensory sciences. So assessing products for their physical sensory attributes. And then looking at that and using that as part of our iterative design process when it comes to our formulations for cosmetics and skincare products, and then other categories that we have as well. So super excited here at Mary Kay now in the Dallas area. So I got to come back to Texas, which was nice after being away for so long. And I have a high school sweetheart for my husband. He went to A&M, so we'll see how that goes in a couple of years. But he was really happy on Saturday, even though things didn't turn out so well for us. And we have 2 boys. So Cameron is 6, he's in 1st grade, and I was just at field day today with him, so that was fun. And then Lucas is 3. So our life is very busy, lots of sports and outdoors, as you heard others mention as well. And so tomorrow will be spent at soccer games, and then hopefully we'll get to a pumpkin patch this weekend for some cute pictures, but we'll see how it goes. So that is a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. And then last but not least, we have Kristen. Tell us about you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Perkins. I graduated chemistry degree as well back in May of 2020. So I've only been working for about a year. A little bit about me and what I enjoy. I love yoga, tennis, and soccer. I'm on a soccer team with my coworkers. So that's a great way to, get some outside socialization and exercise in a fun way. So I love doing anything active. A little bit about me. I actually interned at Texas Instruments after my junior year, and then I joined full-time back in September of, 2021. What I do is I work in a wafer fabrication plant. So I brought a little prop because I always like to give people a visual. I don't know if you can see it, the glare is kind of bad, but I work in our largest 200 millimeter wafer fabrication plant, or a fab for short. In semiconductors, I don't know why we think we're special. We like to call our manufacturing facilities fabs, but I work as a plasma process engineer. And during my internship, I worked in a different group in the same factory, but now I work in a different group in the same factory.
Awesome. I love the visual. That helps everybody see what you're doing. That's great.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, students, now it's your time. You've heard a little bit about each of our fabulous Chemie panelists with all kinds of different backgrounds and twists and turns and career paths. And I'd love to hear from you. What do you want to know more from them? Anything you want to know, anything you want to ask? You can come off mute and ask if you want.
I was going to ask, how is like the work-life balance for all of you guys?
I can start. So, I would say for me, it's pretty sweet. So, I also have 5 weeks of vacation at this point. So full disclaimer. But even before that, back, let's say 10 years ago when I was just first starting to have kids and it was a little more, I didn't have quite so much vacation. My company, it is somewhat supervisor specific, but I would say I've always had supervisors that pretty much let me do my thing. And as long as I'm getting my work done, they don't really care where I am. Especially now that we've been, we worked remotely for so long. I think we've really proved that that's possible. And so many meetings are now Zoom. So it's like there's no point to even go to the office because you're still just meeting in front of your computer all day. Especially in a global company like ExxonMobil, it's rare that I have meetings physically in Houston. So Zoom is just really the norm now. So yeah, I'm kind of at the point now, in my career where I don't even tell my supervisor when I'm coming and going. I just kind of manage my meeting schedule. I put blocks on my calendar when I need to, and I kind of do the things I need to, and I make sure I'm meeting my deadlines and doing what's expected of me. And that's really it. I know a lot of people want like the 980s and the every other Friday off. Personally, I think that would limit our flexibility because then we would be expected to do all of those like doctor's appointments and everything on that Friday that you're off. Whereas now I can kind of schedule things in a way that works best for my schedule when I see that I have kind of lulls and I can take time away.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I would say that I've been really lucky, the two companies I've been with where they've been very flexible and very trusting, as Jessica said, right? If you get your work done, then there's no reason for your supervisors to look too closely into when you clock in and when you're getting your work done. And then also with working from home this last year, I agree. People were balancing lots of different things in their life. At one point, my kindergartner last year was in my office also doing virtual school, right? And so, there was a lot of that flexibility of maybe I'm not doing as much in the traditional 8 to 5, but then maybe I'm logging back on later, or able to kind of ebb and flow with that, knowing that some weeks are busy. I think the only thing, also working for a global company, I interface with China pretty regularly. And so that's where we also have that flexibility of, if I know I'm going to be on a night call, then maybe I end my day a little bit earlier, spend some more time with my family, knowing that I'm logging back in, right? So I think that in today's world, it's gotten even better than it was before. And I would say it was in a great spot previously too.
Yeah, just turning in from, so my last role, I was in a manufacturing site support role. And so I think in those kind of roles, you are expected to be at some point on call. And so, and I'm sure everyone's experienced something like this. So in that moment, obviously, if something's going wrong, you are expected to kind of help and be there, but it's usually pretty fun and interesting, like when you get to firefight and problem solve and do all that troubleshooting. So, you know, usually what they'll tell you during that time is if everything's going right, you know, leave early, take your days, take your short days when you can. And then if things are, you know, hectic and something's going wrong, then you are expected to stay, but it's usually like, it kind of balances itself out. And that's what's nice about being at a company that allows you that flexibility. So.
Yeah, I'm in that manufacturing setting right now where I'm technically on call. I actually haven't been called like in the middle of the night or anything like that, but for the kind of firefighting things that I have had to deal with, number one, that's like when I've learned the most about my job and like how things work. It's a great experience to learn and kind of take that ownership over, okay, what's going on wrong? I'm going to be in charge of troubleshooting this. But also it's like, if you put in extra hours on this one day, you know, you'll be able to take a break on the next week or whenever. So it always ends up balancing out.
And for me, honestly, you know, when I was in my early 20s and thinking about, you know, where is my career path going? What do I want to do? Part of the reason I decided to go to grad school was I didn't want to get those calls in the middle of the night. I was like, yeah, no thanks. So I love research. There's a lot of, for me, what that has meant is I'm pretty driven. I like working a lot, but I also want to have that, that ability to choose like when it is, right? So when I was, you know, earlier in my career, and didn't have my son, I would bring my frozen dinner into work and I'd, you know, work and have my dinner, and then I'd just keep going and do things that to me were really exciting. Turned out I was lucky that they worked out. And that was really good. But now, you know, again, because I can choose how I do it, much like what Nicole was saying, I'll, you know, spend dinner and, you know, late afternoon with my son, and that's awesome. And then, you know, if I've got work that I want to keep, you know, going after, I can do that later. So I think I liked that reassurance of having a little more choice in it, with when you are at work. And I also love research. So if anybody's thinking about going to graduate school, do it. And I'd be happy to talk more about that too.
So I see a question in here, and I see that Jessica responded to that a little bit, but let's talk about, you know, have you felt conflicted about the work that you've had to do? How do you separate that? How do you continue? And Jessica, do you want to talk about that to start?
Yeah, sure. So once again, I work for ExxonMobil, but within the chemicals company. And that's an interesting dynamic because, you know, as a chemicals company, it's harder for us to kind of keep up with our competitors in the sustainability place because we are a part of an oil and gas company. And, you know, our corporate decision makers really run it as an oil and gas company. And since I'm here today as a FabFem and not an ExxonMobil recruiter, I will be honest with you and say that I'm very disappointed in our role in the energy transition, right? So we're pushing carbon capture hard, pushing maybe hydrogen hard, but at the end of the day, they're all still things that enable fossil fuels. So we don't have any investment in renewable energy. We're starting to play in the advanced recycling space, which is really exciting. And that's, you know, very necessary for the plastic waste problem, but it doesn't necessarily help the climate change problem a whole lot. And so, yeah, I'm conflicted. I've been lucky that recently I have roles that have enabled me to speak up and make an impact. So in my sustainability role, I got to do some different pilots that we weren't doing anywhere else in the company. And just to try to like push that envelope a little bit. And even so we have like a formal process to start a sustainability initiative. So, I would submit things knowing full well that they were going to tell me no, but I just wanted them to understand like this is important and we need to be going in this direction. How many more years I can keep this up with getting, constantly pushed back? I don't know. That's a really good question, but at this point, I still feel like I'm able to make some of an impact and have my voice heard. And I guess the one thing I would say about doing that in a company like ExxonMobil, like when we go do advanced recycling, it's going to be huge, right? So even the small work effort that I have has huge impacts for the way that we do things as a company. So that's something I try to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, just
great point about thinking about that. So yeah, go ahead, Rania.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just to speak on that as well. Obviously I'm at ExxonMobil and I kind of echo what Jessica was saying as well. And it's kind of hard, especially as a younger person to, to push back a little bit. But I think what's really cool and what you have an opportunity to do is because you get to be a part to try and be a part of that transition and try and make your voice heard. And even just like in terms of culture issues, like I think how you kind of manage it is just trying to stand up and speak out against like what you think would be good to do. And so it's actually kind of a cool opportunity because I think people are willing to listen and take those opinions. It's just kind of hard sometimes when you're at such a big corporation. So.
I was going to speak maybe on the opposite side. I feel like company values is something that's been very important to me, and it's driven both of my choices at Procter & Gamble and then here at Mary Kay. For those of you that don't know the history of Mary Kay was obviously founded by the woman Mary Kay Ash, who at the time was very disgruntled with being viewed as inferior to her male counterparts, and therefore established a business model that was intentional for women. And I think that's something that really resonated with me a lot, and it's something that still resonates in the company today. However, it's almost like the other side of the coin now of, okay, so now are we including men, right? So men can be part of our sales force, they're part of our business model. And so how do we kind of split that balance of there's still a long way to go for women, but we also don't want to leave anyone behind. And so, we've made really cognizant choices to be inclusive in that way, but our slogan still is about empowering women and enriching women's lives, right? So I think that'll be an interesting evolution to see. On the sustainability side, I think it's been really important to see in both at P&G and here at Mary Kay that we've done a lot in the sustainable manufacturing or using wind sourcing to help run the plants and the operations that we have, mitigating the waste to landfill. So there's been some really good progress in the consumer products industry that I think has become part of that norm. So as Jessica was kind of saying, as we get to the place where big impacts can happen, CPG is a huge place of all the plastics that are involved in packaging. How do we make those more recyclable or reusable? So those are the things that we're focusing on. And I feel like we are having some good goals to help support that. But it's great to be part of that change, as Ramya was saying, right? To be able to voice those concerns and bring that perspective, because it is important and it's becoming even more important.
And
Nicole? Go ahead, Anne.
Sorry.
Go.
I was just going to say, so Rebecca, I think you were the one who asked the question. So the 3 products that I showed all have a sustainability aspect to them. So the first one is a window film that helps reduce IR heating in one's home, so you don't have to cool as much. The second one is a dental product, so you wouldn't think about sustainability, but it allows there's a stress relaxation in this dental filling so that it doesn't crack and you wouldn't get another cavity in a tooth that had already been filled. And so you have to go through that process again. So by making it more robust, that then eliminates the need to, refill, et cetera. And the third one, as I mentioned, has a solvent-free process. So each one had that aspect to it. And part of what was really cool about being in the corporate labs is, you can really have a lot more autonomy about, selecting your projects and what it is that you work on. And you're the person coming up with the new technology to to make those things happen. And I'd also say that, now that I'm more senior, I also, much like Jessica, I can have greater influence about where not just I go, but where we're going with the technology in my division. So I hope that answers your question.
I think the thing to think about is you all, as you go into your careers, will find those opportunities to make that difference in different ways. And those opportunities to speak up, as Jessica was talking about, putting those suggestions in whatever mechanism is allowed. So making sure that you do that so that you can influence what happens in the places that you're working. That's great. So I see a question to Nicole about your management experience, and maybe you can start us off, and then others who have moved into these kind of management roles might have other things to add in. Was there something that kind of helped get you into that space, or something that students might want to consider in their own career paths?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. So the first thing I would say is mentors are critical. And so one of the things that's really helped throughout my career has been having mentors both directly within my organization and in adjacent organizations, because that really helps give you perspective. It also helps give you some of the visibility that you might not see otherwise. And then be clear about what your objectives are for your career. So I made it really clear once I realized I wanted to go the managerial route. And I was constantly in conversations with my leadership to say, hey, this is my career plan. I'd like to meet some of these goals. And then we could set intentional work plans and intentional project directions to give me the opportunity to demonstrate those skills and prove that I was ready for those positions. And I think the last thing is also about, as you're thinking through what you want, it's okay not to know, right? And it's okay to kind of try different things on, and working with your leadership to be able to do that is really helpful. And that's where there's this model that we talked about a lot at P&G called PI, and it's about performance, image, and exposure. And so from a performance standpoint, no one's going to consider you for a promotion in any way if you're not performing, right? So that's a given. Image and exposure are two interesting pieces. So image is, as you interact with others, what is the impression that's left behind, right? Is it, hey, I want them as my lab partner, I want to be on projects with them, or it's, oh, never again, right? And then the third piece is exposure. And exposure is about who knows about the things you're doing. And it's not the look at me kind of show pony attitude, but it's about the genuine, like, hey, I was working on this. I think you might be interested. Can we collaborate on this? Or, oh, I heard about you doing this and I'm doing this. Can we partner up, right? The more people who are aware of what you're doing, the more likely your name is going to be in those conversations that you want it in when it comes time for performance reviews, promotions, salaries, bonuses, whatever those are at your companies. And so a lot of people focus on performance, which is true, but if no one knows how great you are, it doesn't matter. And so you have to be your own advocate in that way. And I think that's been one of the things where I'm an extrovert, my personality helps in that regard. And if you've done strength finders, I'm a woo, like all of those things that helps put me out there is, I think, part of what's made me successful. And that's where, as I'm mentoring people who maybe that's not as comfortable, well, let's find other ways for you to do that. Maybe it's not in a large group setting, maybe it's in more one-on-one settings and in more small group dynamics. But either way, driving that exposure is how you're going to be talked about when you want to be talked about.
Anyone else want to talk about their career path? I love that PI acronym too. I'm going to remember that one. Let's go to this next one. Ramya and Jessica, what was that process that you went through to transition into these different sides of your engineering world?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I've always been kind of more interested on the business side of things. So actually my first internship with Exxon, as I mentioned, was more on the commercial side of things. And so whenever I started in more of like a technical role, I, was thinking through, and one of the really good things about Exxon that I think Jessica could probably echo to as well, is that they really love to move you around into a lot of different variety of positions, and you do get a lot of different roles, and they kind of automatically, like after a couple of years in your role, they're like, okay, what do you want to do next? It's not like, it's rare to be in a role for more than like 3 to 4 years at a time at the most, probably. And so for me, when it kind of came time to thinking of it, I had options to go working like in more of a direct manufacturing role, because before I was in manufacturing support, where I could be, more of like the on-call all the time kind of thing, or I could, do a lot of different things. And so when I was talking to my supervisor and thinking through what I wanted to do, I realized that I think from my internship experiences, I really appreciated understanding the big picture and how the market worked in general. And so I kind of pitched it to him like that, where I wanted to understand a little bit more on how our specific manufacturing site fits into the energy industry as a whole. And I can honestly say, before this role, I really didn't know anything about how the energy market worked. Like, I honestly, like, people would talk about it and I didn't understand. And so I think really being able to have that larger view before going in and doing the really technical work, because I know eventually I'll probably go back to a manufacturing site or something like that. I think it really helps to understand how the economic portions work and why you're doing what you're doing and how that feeds into the bigger picture overall. And so that was kind of my motivation for wanting to move. And that's actually not really typical. Most people, they do all their technical work and then go to the business side of things and then kind of either stay there or go back. But I really like being able to have this experience earlier on in my career, because it just kind of helps put everything together and make everything make more sense. But yeah, I really like the context of the work better.
Yeah, so I guess similar to Rami, I didn't really want a manufacturing career. And so when I hired into ExxonMobil, I told them that I would not work in a plant. And I would always joke about how blue was not my color, because that's the color of the FRCs that you have to wear. So I started in our chemical headquarters location in a supply chain type job, which was doing like network optimization work, which of course I had never done before, didn't know anything about, but that's where my analytical skills came in handy. So they humored me for a little bit, and then they said, okay, now you have to go work in a plant. And I went to the Baytown plant for a few years, and then I actually spent 8 years in Baton Rouge in various plants. So a long time in plants, and contact engineer, production scheduling, coordination type roles, and then eventually I had 3 different supervisory roles in the last plant that I worked in. So I got my fill, and I'm glad that I did manufacturing. It definitely teaches you a lot about the business and kind of, there's always this tug. It's like, are we a manufacturing company and we exist because of that? And then sales will always tell you, well, if you can't sell the product, then there'd be no manufacturing. So there's always this tug back and forth between those two and which one's really more important. But it's good to understand that, especially in a supply chain role, because then you can really, when the plant talks about different constraints that they may have, you can understand better how real or serious those may be. So it helps with that. But then, I did decide to come back to supply chain. I just enjoyed the work and the interactions better, and just the types of problems that you have to solve, I think I'm better suited for. And also, I think it had to do with kind of getting out of that operational type job. So the jobs I've had in supply chain are more long-term planning, strategic, or even project-based. And so that was another reason to switch out of manufacturing into supply chain.
Awesome. Well, we are coming up against our time. I see another question in for Kristen, and then I think we will wrap it up. I know I could keep asking you all lots of questions.
That went fast.
So I know it always goes so fast. Kristen, you want to talk about internships that you had and what made you decide to take that full-time job with TI?
Yeah, so I had an internship after my sophomore year in Austin at a super small company. It was a startup and they did solar panels, and it was interesting, but it wasn't super technical. I wasn't doing much engineering, and I decided I wanted to try something technical, because once you kind of get out of the technical role, sometimes it is hard to transition back, especially in my industry in semiconductors. What influenced me to take the full-time job after graduation was the experience I had during my internship. I really grew to love the people I worked with. And since the semiconductor industry is so new, I was able to work directly with the people that kind of built these manufacturing processes. So I was able to work with people that have been in this industry for 40 years, and they are the ones that like developed the processes of how we produce our material. So I really appreciated being able to kind of work not alongside them as a peer, as well as use them as mentors and learn a lot from them. So I would say I really liked the industry as well. They don't really teach us much about semiconductors as chemies in school. So that was a big learning curve at first, but it was something that interested me, and it's taken me a long time to really understand things. But kind of as Ramya was talking about, like you getting a feel for the bigger picture of like, where does my process fit in with this technology versus this technology? Like, why are we running this material versus this material differently? So I would definitely say it was the people and the support that I had in that knowledge, because it was really intimidating at first, not having learned much about it in school. And I learned about manufacturing and process controls and quality and things like that. But really the technical side of things, I felt interested in the subject. And then I also felt like I had the resources around me to really learn it, to be able to actually do my job well.
Awesome. All the more reason to do those internships so you learn what you don't like and what you're not as much interested in, but then also what you are. I'm seeing lots of nods from folks. I remember that as well. Oh my goodness, y'all, that was fabulous. Let me throw it to each of you one last time for any last words of wisdom or advice or inspiration that you want to share with our students. And I'm gonna go backwards from how I had you all introduce yourself. So Kristen, that puts it on you first.
I would say, well, I guess from a recruiting standpoint, we're trying to get to know you as much as you're trying to get to know us. Make sure you're having like important conversations. Don't be afraid to ask questions when you're recruiting. And then I guess kind of the transition from being in school to being full-time, since I'm still so fresh out of school, I can kind of talk to that. It's a different type of, I guess, ownership of your work. And that was a big transition for me, was going from, okay, when you're in class, you get an assignment, you complete it, you submit it. I mean, you try your best and you want to get a good grade and blah, blah, blah. But you kind of submit it and move on to the next thing. When you're working in industry, you're still doing technical work, but it's a different kind of ownership because it's kind of a reflection of you. So I would say that transition of kind of how you own your work was something I didn't really think about before, but it's something that you definitely have to kind of adjust in your head and figure out how to own your work in a different way.
That's a great observation and a good tip to think about. Thank you, Kristen. Nicole.
So mine is always about having mentors. That I think is critical in any role you're in, anywhere you go. Your mentors can be in the companies you work in, they can be outside of the companies you're in, they can be people you meet at different industry events, but I think mentors are really helpful. My last boss at P&G is still a mentor I talk to regularly, and even though things are different in our dynamic now, I still call on her, and we even have a connect setting up next week because I'm like, hey, I've got this situation, like I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? So for me, that's why I always advertise mentors can be critical. You can use them for different things. Don't think you have to have one mentor for everything. So I might have some mentors that are working moms that I talk to about those dynamics versus other ones who are great leaders and how I want to emulate their leadership capabilities. And so you can also have diversity in different seasons for those those mentors.
Thanks, Nicole. Ramya.
Yeah, so I think my advice would be to just focus on learning in whatever role you end up in. I think really seeing how much you can get out of the role, whether it be like in a technical experience, whether it be in the business side of things. I think really just getting as much as you can out of everything, that really helps you understand what you want to do longer term and if you liked what you wanted to do, and kind of helps you figure out what you want to do long term. So I think, I mean, I can say honestly, like I still don't really know what I want to do long term. And so I'm still learning that as I go. And so I think just being able to get as much as you can for whatever role you're in the moment has been really helpful for me. And so just make sure to focus on that. And even if you're somewhere where you think you may not want to be long term, just remember to try and get as much as you can out of it.
Jessica.
Yeah, I've actually thought about this a lot lately with my 20 years coming up. So I have kind of two pieces of advice I really like to give people starting out that I definitely didn't follow, and now I'm kind of like scrambling to recreate. So the one that I didn't really do very well is maintain your network from college. So keep up with people, keep in touch, see what they're doing, and then of course build on that as you move into your professional career. But that network can prove very helpful, in your current job, or, if you decide that that company's not the place for you and you want to make a change, right? Networking is very, very important. And then the second thing I would say is develop an expertise. So sometimes you can kind of float from job to job, and then when you put it all together, it doesn't really add up to much sometimes. It can be like a lot of disparate experiences. So, and it can be a technical expertise, or it can be a management leadership expertise, but just think about, what inspires you, what you're passionate about for work. And, even if it's not a part of your current job, there's usually always trainings and stuff available. So build on that expertise.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. And Anne.
So great advice from all of the panelists. Every single person, I was nodding my head and saying, oh, yep, absolutely. So great advice. The things that I would say are, one, have fun. Like find the thing in your job that is fun, and, get in there and make it fun. And if you don't have that piece, figure out how you can create something that you just really enjoy, because what Rami is talking about is like getting into it. And if there's that piece that you're having fun, that you really enjoy, it's going to be good for you. You're going to attract people, like Nicole said. You're going to have this energy that people are going to want to know who you are, and that helps you in your career broadly. And the second thing that I would say is that don't feel like step one is the end of the steps. Right? You heard from all of us that we've moved around in jobs. Some of us have moved location, companies, right? Step one is not the end, right? So it's just step one. If it wasn't your flavor, if it wasn't quite right, you're thinking, oh, maybe I could go to graduate school, or that's my thing. Do it. Don't be afraid to look and evaluate where you are, and make a choice to make a change. So those would be my words of advice. And I'd also say, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Awesome. What great advice. Oh my goodness. Such great things. Well, thank you again to all of you. Thank you. Also, a big shout out to 3M and ExxonMobil and Texas Instruments. They are supporting our Women in STEM Leadership Collaborative. We have some of our leaders that are on here, and others that I know that will be watching this later.